The Coast Community College District special meeting of the Board of Trustees is called to order. All trustees are present. There is no public comment at this time. We will now recess to closed session to discuss public employee performance evaluation, conference with labor negotiator, conference with real property negotiator, public employee discipline dismissal release, conference with legal counsel anticipated litigation, conference with legal counsel existing litigation, conference with labor negotiator,
All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. At 1:05, we'll reconvene the open session. At this time, I will ask for a motion to adopt the agenda with the two changes noted. One is we are live streaming and there is a link that's now on the agenda. And then also on item 3.01, under the board meeting dates, we have canceled the August meeting this Friday. It will be rescheduled at some point in the future. So do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
And do I
Second.
have a second?
Second.
I will ask the student trustee
Aye.
and the rest of us.
Aye.
And the motion carries. At this time, 1.07 Pledge of Allegiance, if we can rise and have trustee Carr lead us.
Thank you. If you're able, please rise. Ready, begin.
Stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And at this time, under 1.08, I will have a report out of closed session. Under 1.04G, conference with labor negotiations. The board ratified 6 tentative agreements with Coast Community College Association, the California Teachers Association, National Education Association, which is CCA-CTA-NEA, covering the following articles and global contract changes. Article 4.8, 10, 11, including Appendix C, 15.2 F, 20, and global contract updates by a motion by trustee Hornbuckle, a second by trustee Moreno, and a vote of 5-0, it was ratified. The board also ratified CFE MOU number 26.8 with CFE regarding the 2027-2028 GWC Cosmetology academic calendar on a motion by trustee Hornbuckle, second by trustee Carr. Motion of 5-0, the MOU was passed and ratified. The board voted ratified SESFE MOU 26.9 with Coast Federation Education regarding the 2027 academic calendar, accessibility standards, and online course requirements for regular and substantive interaction on a motion by trustee Moreno, second by trustee Hornbuckle, passed with a vote of 5-0. That ends our report on action of closed session. At this time, do we have a public comments at all?
Not at this time.
Okay, yes. I was going to have you do it at your report. Okay, at this time, I'm going to take a chair's point of privilege, and I would like to recognize our Vice President Moreno that has an important update on a bill that is pending that we need to have a difference because of
Thank
the
you.
change in the bill.
Thank you very much. We're looking forward to AB 2694 and SB 960 that would help community colleges with baccalaureate programs. But we found out and was informed by the Community College League that negotiations taking place in committee changed the criteria for community college baccalaureate, the process, and now and into the future. It would restrict our baccalaureate efforts, and the CCLC asks that we oppose the planned legislation for the changes in these two Assembly and Senate bills. So those recommendations, the Legislative Committee has discussed, and we would ask that our president of the board sign a letter as requested by CCLSA in opposition of these proposed changes in legislation for the baccalaureate degrees.
Okay,
That would be our recommendation.
okay.
And
So
it'll be coming to you for the next meeting.
should we, because don't we want to put it now before, what's the timing of the letter?
Well, go ahead.
Well, the amendments that have been negotiated are not in print yet. And so they need to be in print for 72 hours before the legislators can vote on it. So we have not seen those amendments. We are aware of the negotiations, and the league has let us know of what those negotiations have been. But again, we need to see that. All of these changes need to be voted on by Monday. So this really doesn't give us time to have a special meeting as a board to vote on it. But there may be, I'm not sure if you can take a privilege of being the president.
So it looks like the chancellor's, there's somebody has a question regarding it with the chancellor.
Not that I'm a parliamentarian expert. So the board has the authority and designated quite some time ago, last year, I believe,
Mhm.
that the subcommittee, the legislative subcommittee, have the authority in the absence of the full board to endorse letters that are of a timely nature.
Correct.
My concern is we didn't officially agendize this in terms of the Brown Act for a formal vote. So it would be a
So
notice.
there is something on the Brown Act that says if something comes up, you can have a motion a second. It has to be passed by 4/5 to put in an action item, as long as it couldn't be timely to be put on the agenda.
I defer to the president of the board.
Yeah. So if it would help, then I will ask for a motion to put this as an action item and a second.
I move that we make this an action item for tonight with the timeliness of the legislation in negotiations and what it means to future baccalaureate efforts in the community college system.
And I'll second that due to the urgency to
Okay.
get this and
So to
letter
make
out.
Sure that it all goes number, I'm going to ask, and I'll ask for a voice vote of everybody so that we can confirm it has enough votes to be placed on the agenda for an action item, and then I will take an action item. So I will start with the student trustee.
Aye.
Trustee Wynn.
Aye.
Trustee Hornbuckle.
Aye.
Trustee Carr.
Aye.
Trustee Moreno.
Aye.
Trustee Parker's aye. So it has passed 5-0 to put it on as an action item. So now at
Madam-
this time, I will ask for a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I will make the motion that we bring forward this matter for your immediate action by sending a letter to the committee, and that all that information has been prepared, and it'll be done in final for your signature.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. It is a motion and a second to send this letter out as we've been defined that they will be voting on Monday. So this is a item that could not have put on sooner and cannot wait. So knowing that, I will go ahead and ask the student trustee.
Aye.
And the rest of the trustees.
Aye.
Aye. It does pass. So we will make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And then we will move, no public comments, so we will move to the study session. I will call on the chancellor.
Yes, has become a tradition as we comply with the law to have a tentative budget so that we can actually spend money on July 1 because the legislature and the governor are not required to have the state budget signed until the last week of June. So then the law requires us to pass the adopted budget before September 15th. But in preparation for that, we've established sort of a new tradition here in the last 4 years to have a special meeting at the end of August when the faculty are back in session to have a more in-depth dive so that the trustees and the public can hear in a much greater detail that in terms of not just the adopting the budget, but sort of a historic look and the context to provide for that budget. We will still have a budget hearing with the particulars for the adopted budget at the regular meeting, but this is the opportunity to have a deeper dive with regard to the budget. So with that, I turn it over to Vice Chancellor Drinkwine.
Thank you so much. And as we get started, I first want to acknowledge that this is the result of the effort of several people throughout the district. The district budget is the accumulation of the 3 college budgets. And so it certainly is a reflection of the efforts of the colleges, the college budget committees, the college fiscal team, and the entirety of all of the folks at all of the colleges, and then combined with the district's fiscal team. As we go through tonight's presentation, we will also have a presentation from the colleges of their college budgets and the fiscal stability plans from their colleges. And so I really look forward to their opportunity to present to you their budgets. We're first going to talk about the themes that you'll be hearing tonight, talking about the states, the challenges facing the state, and then moving into the district itself and the success that we're enjoying now, but then the recurrence of the deficit spending that we've been seeing and how it'll become more challenging to find solutions to overcome those deficits. We're going to talk about our history, we're going to talk about our current, and then we're going to talk about our future. So then when we look at our history, with the context that the Chancellor mentioned, we have deficit spent in the past prior to the pandemic. There were different factors facing us, but one of those factors was exactly the same structure we have with our salaries, where we put our COLA on schedule that we have today. Then, as we entered into the pandemic, we enjoyed a multitude of different sources of one-time funding, unusual sources of one-time solutions. Some of those were ongoing, and some of them continued, and those helped us overcome that inherent budget structure that leads to our deficit spending. And you can see this in this trend going back to 2017-18. But you can also see the incredible success in the recent years of those one-time funds, and also the success of our fiscal stability plan that helped us overcome the deficit spending. And some of that you can see in the most immediate fiscal year in 2025-26. We started the year with a projection of an ending fund balance of $73.8 million, and yet we ended up with $78 million. An incredible difference. And we started the year looking at an ending fund balance percentage of 26% and ended up at 26.76. You may have expected a little bit more improvement with that ending fund balance percentage. It only went up 76%. And that's because our expenditures went up a lot. So let's look at what changed over last year. Quite a bit changed. If we recall, at the beginning of the year, we only were able to give a 0.23% increase to salaries. That's because it was a very unusual year. That was the year we actually expected to be at the funding floor. We actually had projected for several years that we were going to get zero increase. It was the funding plateau that for 5 or 6 years we had projected that we would get no new money that year and that nobody was going to get any increases at all. But somewhere around January of the year before, we realized we had some incredible enrollment growth, enough that it actually pushed us above the funding floor. We just didn't know how far, but it pushed us above the funding floor. Just a little bit, though, just enough to give us 0.23%. And then right after we had our adopted budget, the state right after we got our initial tentative budget, the state enacted their budget. And they gave us growth beyond 0.5%. They gave us a lot of growth. And so this combination of being above the funding floor and a lot of growth made us go, we could do a summer shift. A summer shift is when you take eligible summer enrollment from the following year where it's normally reported and report it in the previous year. And we were able to do that. Over 2,000 summer enrollment, put it in the prior year, and magically we were able to reach 2.3% COLA. $6 million more in SCIF revenue in 25-26. We're able to place 2.3% on the salary schedules for represented employees at a cost of $2.8 million. So we netted $3.2 million more in total revenues. And that was some great news. So that increased expenses, but it also increased revenues. We also had a couple $1 million in salary savings. We had $4.7 million in salary savings in 25-26. That's a combination of ongoing and one-time. One-time salary savings coming from the period of time it takes to recruit people when we have a vacancy. Typically, you're looking at a 3 to 4 month period at minimum. It may be longer if when you have a vacancy, you're taking time to study a position to determine if you want to fill it. And in that case, you're generating more. We do have a board policy that requires a position to be closed after 12 months, so you're not going to be generating more than 12 months. But so one-time salary savings can be a lot. But in 25-26, we had about $4.7 million. We also had an unusual event generating about $700,000. We rarely have prior year adjustments, but we had a new GASB. A GASB is a Governmental Accounting Standard Board pronouncement. It was number 101. They don't do them very often. There's only 101 of them. I think actually there's 103 now. This one had to do with how we recognize the liability for accrued leaves. Accrued vacation, accrued sick leave has a cost to the district because when somebody separates from the district, we have to pay out vacations. And for sick leaves, we actually have to pay PERS and STIRS. And GASB changed how we do them. And we had to recalculate it for 24-25. And interestingly, it cost us less. It cost us $740,000 less. So we had to do a prior year adjustment. Very interestingly, I thought we were going to pay more. And then sadly, and I think many of you who heard me talk about our former self-funded PPO before, talked about how historically it was underestimated. The 25-26 actual cost was $3 million greater than was estimated. So that means that that cost is paid from our self-insurance fund. So that means that our self-insurance fund was upside down by $3 million. So we had to do a transfer from our unrestricted general fund to the self-insurance fund to cover that. And so the end result was, pardon me, I'm going in the wrong direction. That difference there, that net difference was caused by the pluses and minuses between all of that. It's a lot more activity than we would normally see in any given year. 25-26 was a very busy fiscal year. But then when we look at the 26-27 state budget, I think the state had an even busier budget year than we did in the 25-26 year. They had a lot of moving parts happening over the course of the 25-26 year coming into the 26-27 year. This is, I think, the third or fourth year that they had unexpectedly high revenues, that they projected lower revenue growth. And then they had much higher revenue growth. But all of those new revenues were generated by 4 tech firms, largely from stock options, from personal income taxes, from stock options, primarily related to actual AI activities. It's a very unstable basis for revenue growth. And a lot of the actions that you see the state taking in their budget is in recognition of the instability that's inherent with that revenue growth. They're also looking at very unstable federal funding and uncertain reimbursement from the feds. On top of which, they have rising Medi-Cal and CalFresh costs. So the other portion of the state budget is putting a lot of pressure on the education portion of the budget because they have increasing pressures with uncertain revenues. The good news on the state budget was back in January, they had nearly $3 billion of a shortfall, and that's been completely resolved with those new revenues. And with those new revenues, they were able to establish and rebuild many of those reserves that in the prior year they decimated. They had withdrawn dollars from the rainy day fund, from the stabilization account, and they were able to restore those. They had some constitutionally required deposits that they've remade. They've even created this temporary stabilization account. All of that in recognition of the instability inherent with the new revenues. So they're trying to set themselves up to be able to withstand the next year if things don't go well, which is good. And they've also done some corrections to Prop 98, some corrections and some deferrals, some delays. They've done some corrections for us. They've cemented some protection for us in relationship to our split with K-12. Some little uncertain things happened last year with our split to K-12. You know, Prop 98 is always open to manipulation. They used to think it was like in this protected little cage, and it's not. The movement of transitional kindergarten into and out of Prop 98 really affected how much dollars were to get dedicated to community colleges. And so this year there was a correction made when they were shifting state preschool into Prop 98. That strange shift actually protected community colleges and restored funding dedicated to us. And another shift they made ensured that community colleges are now going to get slightly more than 11% of our share of Prop 98, which is important because it's going to preserve that for us forevermore, or until the next Prop 98 manipulation. But for the current, we're going to get 11.1, and that's really important. But there's another step that the administration took, and that was that with the increase in revenues, they recalculate 2025's 26's minimum guarantee. And it went up because more revenues, it goes up. It creates an obligation. That obligation was deferred till 27, 28 at the soonest in recognition of the uncertain revenues. So that means they're not giving us our money today. They'll give us our money tomorrow or some other time if they defer it again. But some of the really good news is that we are getting more money today. Not only are we getting the statutory 2.87%, but we're getting this extra discretionary COLA ongoing, the 1.44%. It is tied to AB 65, this implementation of expanded paid pregnancy disability leave. We did look at what that potential cost will be. Both Vice Chancellor Fierro and I looked at this, and we talked about this from a conceptual standpoint. We looked at how many people took pregnancy disability leave over the past year that was 14 weeks or more. Understanding that a person may not take that long of a disability leave, even though it is disability, if they weren't going to get paid for it, that is part of that process, that decision point. And there were not many people. But also understanding that the cost to the district is sometimes challenging to determine. When you have a person who is out on an extended medical leave, each department handles that extended leave in different ways. You don't automatically hire a replacement. You don't automatically bring in a temporary substitute. It depends on what that person's position is. It depends on where they're placed. You cover that absence in different ways. And so the dollar value, you can say that that person's daily compensation is one thing, but the district's cash cost is another thing. And so it's hard to define the actual cash cost to the district for this. So when you try and value that, that's a different concept. But we do know that many of our employees do have a lot of leave. And so in the past, that's how they've covered it. But this law requires you to provide that employee with leave that's in addition to the accrued leave, not from the same bucket, interestingly. That COLA of 2.87% is applied to the categorical programs that receive COLA. The state categorical programs that receive the COLA do not receive that higher combined COLA of 4.31%. So I'll make that clear, that 4.31% COLA goes only to the SCIF. So when we talk about those handful of state categorical programs that receive the COLA, they do only receive the 2.87%. That's an important note because those used to be the lucky few that could better afford the salaries that received the COLA. Now those lucky few are still going to struggle in their budgets to afford the salaries that are getting the 4.31% COLA because they're only getting 2.87%. Except for, strangely, the SCA program, because they're getting 5.74%. They never get the COLA. They normally get 0. So it's been a wild ride with the COLA this year. So we've got COLAs all over the place. So I'm going to give it a recap. We've got a statutory COLA of 2.87%. We've got a discretionary COLA of 1.44%. So the total of 4.31% goes to the SCIF. A handful of state categorical programs get only 2.87%. An SEA program is the big winner with 5.74%. And represented employees get 4.31%.
Excuse me, can you define SEA?
SEA, I have been really bad with my acronyms today. Student Equity and Achievement Program. Those are, it's a conglomeration of several different programs that they brought together to one giant categorical program. Dr. Serban, what were some of the programs that they combined into this giant categorical program?
So in the old times, we used to have matriculation funding. Then there was a separate basic skills funding, and there was a separate equity funding. So all those have been combined into this umbrella large funding.
You have a lot of discretion within this umbrella to spend it for student equity and achievement. So you have it in this big pot, but it has historically not received a COLA, but you have under this program a lot of positions and salaries. So it's been challenging not to get COLA with it because you have people on there providing these services to students.
Thank you. Just want to make sure we're all understanding. Thank you.
And I should have spelled that out on this slide, so forgive me for that. And then growth also has been a journey over the course of this year from the state budget. Where we ended up was a combined 2.5% growth over 2 years. The state's been doing this over the couple of years, giving us growth over a 2-year period. And that's because the system has done a great job in advocating for more and more growth because several districts have been growing and not being fully funded. So in the prior year, 25-26, a lot of districts had unfunded growth. So you see the state providing an additional 1% to give additional growth funding for 25-26. But great news in 26-27, we have 1.5% growth, which is great. We think we are going to have some funding, some growth, and we're going to be able to use that additional growth funding. And just a note, no district will get more than 10%, but if there is additional growth that above that amount, that gets reallocated over 1.5. So if you have some dollars left over after you spread the growth funding around, people will get funded above what they've got, but no district will get more than 10%. And lastly, and this is really good news for us because we do benefit from this next bullet, under SCIF, traditional credit, and that is the majority of our enrollment, gets funded on a 3-year average, or it has under SCIF. They had a change in law, and again, this is based on advocacy of the system, because that 3-year average, while it's great if you're in decline, because it softens your decline. It's not great when you're in growth because it blunts your growth. They now, beginning with 26-27, allow us to be funded at the greater of the 3-year average or your current year. And we're getting the benefit of that because our current year is greater than our 3-year average. And so here, this is a quick little chart that lets you see the progression of the state's budget. But I do want to point out that the Common Cloud Data Platform now has ongoing funding of $5 million a year, which is fantastic. I also want to point out that deferred maintenance is $120 million, so it is funded this year. And we have those dollars and we'll be allocating them to colleges this week. Oh, and I do spell out student equity and achievement in this chart. So I spelled it out there. And so for the district's budget, this is the budget development cycle. It's great because it does show you the work that the entire district has been doing since January. And these are our multi-year projection summary. So it does give you an idea about how we build our budget. And these are those programs that we operate that are receiving the COLA. And then it shows you, it's not an all-inclusive list. We definitely operate a lot more categorical and restricted programs than what's shown on this slide. But these are some of the biggies. But it does show you, gives you a good sense of which programs are not receiving the COLA at all. And I mentioned how it's going to be a struggle for those programs that are receiving the COLA because we are placing that full combined COLA on the salary schedule, and these categorical programs are getting only 2.87%. The categorical programs with the check mark in the far right column receive no COLA. And programs are people, meaning they do have employees in those programs, and they typically have to reduce other expenditures in order to afford the increases. It is a challenge for those programs. But it's challenging when the state chooses not to provide all the programs with COLA. And just a reminder that with the SCIF, they do have two guarantees. So SCIF, the district receives the greater of our calculation, the stability protection, or the hold harmless. And that's always a reminder because it does impact what we receive. As we look at our enrollment trends, just a reminder that when we see the little blue at the top, that means that that was a year we did the summer shift. And I want to thank Dr. Serban for providing us with this chart. But you can see how in 24-25, we do have the 2,200 FTES that was shifted from 25-26 to 24-25. And the reason that worked was because 25-26 was in a guarantee. And you can see in 26-27, that's what we are projecting, 27,000. And that is our budget year. You heard me mention that they changed the calculation so that we are now funded on the greater of a 3-year average for the current year. For 26-27, that means we get funded on 185 more FTES than we would otherwise. That's worth $1 million. That's worth $1 million for us. So if they had not changed the calculation, we would have $1 million less. Another huge change for us was a recategorization of FTES from traditional credit to incarcerated. That, and if I get this wrong, I'm going to ask Dr. Serban to step in, because it is from her area that this incredible development occurred. And it was for FTES generated through Coastline. But that traditionally, and you know what, Dr. Serban, would you like to explain it? I think that it came from your area and you probably could tell the tale better than I.
Actually was staff at Coastline who inquired with the state chancellor's office, but we wanted something in writing. For many years, they told us that if the classes are online or correspondence, we cannot claim incarcerated FTS, that the instruction needs to be by having a faculty member go on site and do the instruction. So based on that, we have never claimed the incarcerated FTS, but staff for Coastline made some further inquiries, and then we were able to get in writing that doesn't matter the modality in which the class is offered, that we can, as long as the students are in the right place, jail, etc., and they are truly incarcerated, we can claim the FTS. And I don't know if Dr. Rodriguez wants to add anything else.
You summarized it.
And the reason this matters is traditional credit FTS are paid $5,649 per FTS. Incarcerated credit FTS are paid $7,922, 40% more, about $3 million in total. That's significant and that's ongoing. No, we can't go back in time and get it all back, but it is significant. It is the same incarcerated student we're serving. It is the same education they're receiving. It was just the modality. It's the right decision the chancellor's office finally landed on. And so it's just a correction. On this slide, we're showing you what our projections are. We are assuming in 26, 27 that we're going to have a 1% increase in traditional credit. But we're also assuming that in other areas, our special admit, that's our concurrent enrollment or dual enrollment, we are growing like gangbusters. Same with our enhanced non-credit, our traditional non-credit. Those are all growing. You'll see a 0 on our incarcerated students because we're tapped out on our max there. And in the out years, the reason you see only 0.5% growth is that traditionally the state only funds 0.5% growth. So
If we can just 1 second.
Yeah, I just
Technical
had,
question. yes.
just a technical question. Why are we capped out for incarcerated students?
Dr.
I
Rogers?
can address that. Well, first off, there's federal regulations that limit us to only having 25% of our students incarcerated. But cosign's growing at a pace of about 6 to 7% a year. So our incarcerated program will also grow by that same pace. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to exceed the federal limit. And then once we do, we request a waiver from the Secretary of Education. Prior administration, my understanding was when you requested the waiver, they allowed you to stay over that threshold. The current administration's perception of it is you get the waiver to get back below it. But we're going to take advantage of it while we can, and we'll see what administration and what their consideration is after we go over. So it's going to grow.
Until we get waivers, it'll be 0. So it's after we get it, then we'll show the growth. Yeah. You're welcome. I will say that projecting for the supplemental and the student success is a little bit more challenging. And those rates are more complicated. But then when we look at our student-centered funding formula projections, what I really want to bring your attention to is on line 7. In the past, when we would have looked at this chart, and line 7, 8, and 9 really are showing you whether we're getting funded based on our calculation, meaning funded exactly at what we're generating, whether these are our enrollments, these are our completions, these are our students receiving financial aid, or at a guarantee. In the past, like for 25, 26, where we're getting funded out of stability protection, you would have seen it all over the place. Looking forward in the future, we're getting funded at our calculation. That's a much more stable area to be at. In the past, we always talked about, are we going to pierce the funding floor? Are we going to get above the hold harmless? When are we going to get there? We're there. We grew beyond that. And that's a good place to be, that we grew enough to be funded at our calculation. It was a big discussion just 2 years ago where we're going to grow enough to get above the hold harmless, and we got there. And that means that we're growing enough to be stable. I doubt we'll ever be funded at the hold harmless again. The stability protection will always be there for us. It's designed to provide us protection against declining enrollment. So if we should ever decline in a year, that's there to be our safety net. But I doubt we'll ever be at the hold harmless again. And that says a lot about how much we've grown. But as we look in 26, 27, you can see that when we were talking at tentative, our growth in revenue over 25, 26 was only about 1%. And we talked about how we might have to do a summer shift again to get there, if you recall. Instead, with our actual growth combined with the change in the law and the calculation that let us use the greater of the current year, combined with the recategorization of the incarcerated, let us get almost all the way to the COLA increase without a summer shift, which is great. Because when you do a summer shift, you have a future negative impact. You always have this thing you've got to manage in the future. Not doing the summer shift right now lets us preserve that as an option for the future if we need to maximize revenue next year. We get to save that as an option. So we got maximized revenue without having to do the summer shift. That's great news. And then as we look forward, even with just 0.5% growth, we're really maximizing revenue. This is a good chart and it preserves options for the summer shift in any year to pump up our revenue if we need it. And then we go and shift to the expenditure side of our budget. Changing health plans allowed us to reduce our expenditures. We know that compared to what our 26-27 expenses would have been under the former plan, the SISC plan is saving us $10 million. Compared to what the tentative budget projected under the unrestricted general fund, it is nearly $4 million less compared to what it was in 25-26. It is even less than it was in 25-26. There are savings all over the place from the change to SISC. And we also know that the PPO plan itself in 25-26 was $3.2 million above what was even estimated there. So when we look at the end results of all of those changes on our multi-year budget, in 26-27, when I brought you the tentative budget, we had projected deficit spending of $11.2 million. We had an $11.2 million problem. In 26-27, that deficit is nearly entirely resolved. On line 13, you see that we still have a very, very small deficit of $457 million or $457,000. I do want to mention that again, in 25-26, we had salary savings of $4.7 million. That is the average for the past 3 years. I anticipate that we have salary savings of at least $3 million again in 26-27. That means that I would anticipate that we would actually have improvement of about another $3 million in 26-27.
Technical question.
Yes.
So if we anticipate historical data that shows the, and I know all the reorganizations and the reality that we've, and will continue to do that to have permanent, permanent positions unfilled. But if there is an anticipation of 3 million, why would we not put it on here so that we can take a look at that? Because right now it shows a deficit about $500,000. But if it's pretty consistent, the way we fill positions or how long in the delay, that would be my question, because there's always a question, how did we suddenly go from a $500,000 deficit to a $2.5 billion surplus?
If this was next year, I would. And the reason we hadn't before was coming out of the pandemic, we didn't have enough of a pattern to identify it. We also had a lot more budgeted vacancies. And so it's only this year that we had enough 3-year history after closing all of those vacancies to identify it. So now we got 3 years after we closed all those vacancies to identify it. It's still not certain because you have to have that level of attrition. You have to have that many people leave to generate the salary savings. It's fairly reliable.
Mhm.
And I will, over the course of this year, be bringing it to DCC budget and saying we should anticipate some portion of this, not the entirety, but some portion of this, because it is fairly reliable. And that's why I'm acknowledging it here with you.
Got it. So
Yes.
you'll be bringing it to DCC
Yes.
so that they can keep an eye on that,
Yes.
so that we can see how reliable that figure is. Although, if I'm hearing this right, nothing is reliable enough to put it in what we're asked to do. However, with the DCC, you'll be in explaining as the trend is what it is, hence why the ending balance when we close the book for 26, 27 most likely won't show a deficit unless we have another
Correct.
pandemic or something crazy. Okay.
And that's why our quarterly updates are so critical. Because at each of the quarterly updates, we do recognize the salary savings that occur over the course of each quarter. Because we can see for each quarter how much salary savings we have district-wide. And we can, based on those salary savings, not only recognize it, but also update our year-end projection. And so that allows us, even if we don't recognize it in our budget, update it as we go along. But it also gives us the opportunity to adjust our budget assumptions so that we can build that in. But it's a reflection of how our budget assumptions should evolve. So that now that we've established this 3-year history, it should inform our budget assumptions. And so that's why we'll bring it to an DCC budget, and you'll see it in slightly different. But it is important for me to acknowledge that with you so that when you see this negative 457,000, I can share with you, I do believe that it will be better than that by at least $3 million by year's end.
Thank you.
And I don't want to steal your thunder because I do want to talk about 27, 28 and the big bold line at the bottom with the $11.2 million deficit. So can we talk about that?
Absolutely. So when we look to the next year, the cause of the deficit spending in the next year is because we are placing the 3.3% COLA on salary. And even though we have moved to a lower cost health plan, and that means that with a lower cost health plan, our base for health cost is lower, we still anticipate 4% increases in health costs each year. And so in addition to the increase in salaries of 3.3%, we will have a 4% increase in healthcare costs. We will continue to experience the step and column of 1%. We will still continue to experience the other benefit costs on top of the salary, the step and column, and the increase. So we still have the STRS and PERS costs on top of those. And so as a result, you have salary and benefits costs increases that are greater than the new money we receive. So you have ongoing expenditures increasing faster than your ongoing revenues. That is our inherent imbalance. And that's what gets you there. The other areas of cost increases that are significant, and they're externally caused, are insurance. Our property and liability insurance increased by 20% this year. We expect a similar increase next year. That is the insurance environment. It is global. It is not just nationwide, it is global. The IT costs are similar. Those are escalating about 7% annually. It's unavoidable. And energy costs are also challenging. When we look at budgeting those non-labor areas, we typically budget at the consumer price index, which is typically your measure of inflation that we all experience. But we had to target those specific areas with alternate escalations because of those extraordinary increases in costs. We are tracking those specific costs. And so when we come back to you at the first quarter projections, first quarter is normally an easy peasy kind of projection. It's something that we normally just don't spend a lot of time on. It's just first quarter. It's going to be different this time around. We want to really examine it and track the impact on 27, 28. We did not expect with those escalations to see such an outsized impact. And so we're tracking that really closely to make sure that it's not an exaggeration.
Right, and I agree. I mean, especially with the insurance going up 20%, at some point that has to level off, right? And so the same thing with energy costs and IT, you kind of hope that it would. So I'm hoping that the 11 million is a worst case scenario. And as things start to come in, hopefully that will look a little bit more manageable.
And we're also trying to manage those costs in other ways. So with our insurer, we have a JPA SWAC, and I sit on the board of the directors and the finance committee. And so within that field, they're trying to find other cost mitigations that protect each of the members from some of those cost escalations. And so I'm in my role there, trying to make my vote count and I have a weighted vote because we're one of the larger districts. I try and say, yeah, no, let's do other things that don't push the cost on us. Let's push out our impact. So to the extent that we can to protect ourselves from that. But we do take a conservative approach that assumes that we don't have those protections and that we do bear the full cost.
Trustee
While we're
Hornbuckle.
on this page, I've gotten used to seeing that deficit factor of 0.5% year after year after year. And now I see it's not on the budget for 26, 27 going forward. You want to tell me why?
One of the few times I am not conservative. It's truly a reflection of the reality. And of the impact of having it. So the reality is that in the most recent years, the state has, well, first let me talk about why there's a revenue deficit. A revenue deficit happens at the state level when the appropriation, which is a dollar amount, the state appropriates a dollar amount to fund statewide all district SCIF. And when that dollar amount falls short, so they've estimated not quite right, and it falls short of being able to fully fund all the districts, they have a deficit factor. So everybody gets short equally. The state, when they enact the next year's budget, will appropriate a dollar amount to backfill everybody. And they have done so every single year for the past 4 or 5 years, even longer. That they have not let a deficit factor stand since 2016, 17. And even then it was minimal. And even then they backfilled it like 4 years later. They have shown their commitment to fully funding districts SCIF. They have always fully funded it. And then the impact is this, that when we project a 0.5% deficit, what it does to colleges is that the colleges cannot budget that 0.5%. They're shorted that revenue. And when the district does finally get informed there's a zero, it's not till the February following the fiscal year, so 19 months later. So by time the district's able to release it to the colleges, it's as one-time money, so they can't use it for ongoing things, and it's much later. So they can't use it in the same ways they could have with their other funds. So they can't use it like the other dollars. So since one, the state's shown a commitment to fund it, and two, it's not as useful to the colleges as it would have been, there's just a lot of reasons why we won't fund it. And three, during the pandemic, my predecessor started withholding, started retaining the deficit, just in a measure, just in case we shorted money. If you remember, everybody was panicking that we weren't going to have any money, so started retaining that dollars, and so built up a $6.7 million reserve. That money we now have as a reserve, so if the state does ever have a deficit, I got a reserve to cover us. So if we have a shortfall, I can cover it. And so we brought this to DCC budget. We talked about it, and DCC budget as a committee agreed that it makes sense to make those dollars available to the colleges so they can budget it, and that we have a good plan that state showed the commitment to fund it. And if for some reason they had and applied the deficit at the district, we have a reserve to backfill it. You're welcome.
Since we're on this page also, I see that in 28, 29, we're dipping below the board reserve percentage. I know it's a conservative projection, but that concerns me.
It concerns me as well. The power of a multi-year projection is it identifies the problem, so that once it identifies your problem, you can solve it. The primary problem, the base problem, is that we have a structure, a salary structure that results in deficit spending. I don't think we can solve that problem by 28, 29, but we can create solutions around that. We have created solutions going back to 23, 24. The solutions we have remaining and facing us are not at the same size as the solutions we found in the most current year. Those ones were pretty big solutions. I don't have a lot of $10 million solutions left facing us. But we have been incredibly successful with the fiscal stability plan. And there are additional solutions out there. Looking at things like what revenues can the district parcel generate, looking at more creative reorganizations, looking at additional savings and revenue generations. There are additional solutions.
Which made me think about that maneuver of, I think, 8 million that we did to from the retiree fund. What is the balance in that fund, and how much more can we tap into?
So we are having a completely new actuarial done of the retiree trust, because several factors are changing. Not only do we have a new health benefit plan, but we also know that the annual cost of the retiree trust was underestimated. If the annual cost of the self-funded PPO was underestimated, so was the annual cost of the retirees. The retiree cost was also underestimated, right? So we needed to have a whole new actuarial study performed, and that's being done right now. So when that's complete, then we'll have a better sense of how close to being fully funded the retiree trust will be. And then we can have another determination made about how best to, how close we are to maybe perhaps having the trust take over funding those costs. And we can have that determination, and that may be one of the primary solutions.
Okay.
And that would get us very close to a good solution. Maybe we do have another $10 million solution.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this page? It's
was
quite a
gonna-
page.
It's a very good page.
Trustee Parker. A lot of diligent work. Again, Marlene was, Vice Chancellor Drinkwine was being cautious in her less conservative in terms of the deferred factor, the deficit factor. The state has had a deficit factor larger, typically larger than 0.5%. And so that was a concern that we had, but the state does fill it back even though it's larger. So we thought the intermediate measure was to keep the 0.5%. But again, given the track record that the state's been able to fill it back in the same year, so that we can cover it, or it doesn't exist anymore, then that gives us assurance. And then the other factor again is that we have a designated part of our reserves specifically for backfilling that. There's nothing worse than having a district that is so close to the edge that if in fact the state shorts us, that the district has to borrow money to make payroll. Because when the state gives us the money back, that district, the money back, they don't give you that plus the interest costs.
Right.
So it's important to have that separate fund. The discussion about the retirement health benefits, again, is a really important one. It was part of our general reserves, earmarked specifically for that purpose, for retiree benefits. But again, a reserve is one time. So when you end up using it, you forego using it again because you used it that one time by definition, right? So to Trustee Wynn's point, we would revisit that every year. This year, it would work because we're close enough and that we might as well use it. We're very cautious about draining that down to zero, because then if there is a worst case scenario, then we've already essentially used that solution and it can't be used again. And again, in terms of Vice Chancellor Drinkwine, the retiree trust depends on two factors: how fast the health insurance costs go up, and what the rate of the return on the investment is. And as we talked about in terms of the revenue to the state of California, it's because 4 tech companies are doing really well, and all of the employees that get these stock options and cash them in have to pay capital gains tax to the state of California. Probably unsustainable. And so that same thing would apply too, in terms of the value of the stock market and what it does to the retirement portfolio. So it would be logical to think that we might engage in making that decision every year, but we don't want to promise to make that decision and look at it year by year to in if you will, in an abundance of caution, in that striking that middle road. So the possibility is there. One might argue it's a likelihood, but we have to do it understanding that once we use it, we use that part of the reserve and it's not available anymore.
Exactly. And to the point of the revenue deficit, the state actually had one in its most recent calculation for 25-26, 0.33%. They're going to backfill it. They're going to backfill it. This is our projected ending fund balance for 26-27. I just want to point out, when we talk about our ending fund balance, out of the 78 million, 16.5 million is held at the colleges. So when I say our budget is the colleges, so is our ending fund balance. And that amount for the deficit factor, you can see there under assigned, it's the very last one, 6.7 million for the deficit factor. And this brings us to our stability plan. As we talk about solutions, again, the stability plan's goal is to align ongoing expenditures with ongoing revenues. Once we achieve that, then we have stability. It's multi-year. We've been working on this since 23, 24. This slide shows you what improvements we've made in each year. It's a combination of ongoing and one time. Those are some big numbers. This is through last year. And then when we look at this year, some big numbers here in this year. 26, 27, and forgive me that under phase 5, that should say 26, 27 final budget, not 25, 26. I always joke that I will have at least one error in my PowerPoint that I will not see until I'm sitting up here at the dais and the PowerPoint is as big as it can be. I think this is my one error, but there could have been an earlier one, but I'm pretty, there was another one, yeah. I'm going to pretend this is my one.
I didn't want to point out your other one, but
Yeah, shucks.
it's okay.
Shucks. Okay, this is 2 errors. My whole 2 errors this year. There was no other error ever. Oops, wrong way. In any case, so these are the actions. The 21.7 is a combination of the change to the SISC, the utilization of one-time transfer of $10 million, the identification of the incarcerated FTES, and some of the actions you're going to hear from our vice presidents of administration now. So we get to hear somebody else's voice instead of my own for a little while. With that, we're going to start with Orange Coast College and our newest vice president of administration, Stephanie Slagan. Come on up. Stephanie.
Good evening, Board President Parker, members of the Board of Trustees, Chancellor, and members of the public. My name is Stephanie Slagan. I'm the Vice President of Administrative Services at Orange Coast College. We're presenting the adopted budget today. Our budget strategy centers on continuous project or program improvement. We're evaluating instructional cost and demand, expanding appropriate cost recovery efforts, reviewing organizational structures for efficiencies, and pursuing additional revenue through facility rentals, event parking, enrollment opportunities, and enterprise activities. We also continue using categorical funds strategically to offset unrestricted where available. So our unrestricted actuals versus budgets. For 26-27, the unrestricted general fund has 125.1 million and it's balanced in both revenues and expenditures. The budget includes a beginning and projected ending balance of approximately 2.6 million. And we're also planning to transfer 3 million into capital outlay, which will address critical facility and infrastructure needs. So our adopted unrestricted general fund. So it's important to note on this slide that 90% of our budget is in salaries and benefits. This means our ability to create ongoing savings is closely tied to staffing decisions, organizational structure, and careful management of vacancies while continuing to protect instructional and student service priorities. So our adopted dedicated revenue. You'll notice that the largest dedicated local revenue are our international and out-of-state resident fees, followed by miscellaneous local income, rents and leases, and our child development labs, school, and parking fines. These revenues are important because they diversify our local resources and reduce pressure on the unrestricted general fund. So our fiscal stability plan. Looking ahead, we're taking a look at we're taking deliberate actions to strengthen the budget through both new revenue and ongoing cost savings. We're looking at closed positions, and completed or planned reorganizations represent more than 800,000 in total savings. And at the time, we are closely monitoring self-supporting operations, including the child center, early education lab, and food services. And if you have any questions regarding our general fund budget, I'll be able to answer them now.
Yes. Welcome to Coast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and I had most of my questions answered
Okay.
this afternoon. Just one note, next time we have it, if there's an opportunity for you to put the percentages.
Yes, we did notice that after everyone
Yeah.
turned in their slides.
'Cause
Yes.
I do think that's important for people to recognize that 90% of the budget goes to
Yes.
salary and benefits. And
Yes.
it's not as obvious when you look at the pie chart, but
Yes.
when you actually have it, it's
It's a large percentage.
correct.
And we're working to move that down towards it. It actually has declined year over year. So
Okay.
90%, I think we were at like 92% last year.
Okay.
So it has declined. We're actually working towards moving that towards a lower direction. So that's one of the priorities, is to reduce that number.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I have a question about parking.
Yes.
As I've been going to a lot of events over at the fair, I know we're trying to get up to working, but it appears that may be an unintended expected revenue source. I know at $10 a car, it doesn't seem like a lot, but man, I went to one of my concerts and all the way through Adams was completely full.
So you'll be happy to know that this year alone, we increased the revenue just from the OC Fair by about $94,000 just from the OC Fair.
Yeah.
It was an increase of $94,000 just from that. So that'll pay for at least our graduation. If not, well, our graduation is about 40,000. So it will double that. So we'll have revenue left over. So that is an income generating revenue source.
So that investment was a big return on it. That's a big return on investment to do the, not to have the ticket and to have the
Correct.
online and to see who's paid and hasn't. But I started counting cars and I was like, oh man, I sure hope they're capturing all these cars.
And we increased our signage all over campus to ensure
Yeah,
that everyone had the QR codes and everything like
Yeah.
that.
So
So
good
that
job.
is a large income generator.
Take advantage of where that location is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
No,
Thank you.
And if I can remind you, we changed our board policy, I think it was just two years ago, to allow special event parking rates. Before then, we limited it to like $5. So, and now we allow the colleges to set it. There's no cap. And now we have Rick Hicks, Vice President of Administration, Rick Hicks from Golden West.
And I'm quickly going the wrong way. I apologize. Good evening, Dr. Parker. Good evening, Honorable Board. It's great to be here with you. We had a wonderful day this morning at Golden West College. Thank you to Trustee Fu and also to Dr. Parker and the Chancellor for being there. We had the Board of Governors for the state, and they were very complimentary of our Chancellor, of our district, of our campus in the area of innovation. And in the spirit of that, I want to say a couple things. One is we're grateful to the Chancellor, the Vice Chancellor, and all of our peers here in the district for finding innovative ways, as you're seeing and as you're hearing, to bridge what we thought was going to be a very substantial budget gap between last year and this year. We've closed that gap, and in that same spirit and in the sense that our budget is committed to finding ways to save costs where appropriate, but also to make investments to grow our infrastructure, grow our FTS, and grow our programs. We also want to highlight a few of those things. So when you look at our cost savings for this year, I just want to highlight a couple of things and not belabor a slide that you can easily read. But we're trying to be very creative in how we do that. And I want to give you an example. We reorganized our business office last year, but we didn't just reorganize it in an effort to save money. We did save some money there. but we also increased the work expectation of that unit. We had higher categorical work that was assigned to those, and the employees were promoted into those positions and had to pass probation demonstrating their competence. So not only did we join in saving some money for the budget, but more importantly, we expanded the competency and we expanded the opportunities that our budget office can deal with and in that sense, protect the campus and protect our budget. Another one that I want to highlight very quickly is that as we're looking for cost savings and reorganization, again, it's an opportunity to assess what are our actual needs. And so we have planned for this next fiscal year, a reorganization in our student services program that we think will save us about $400,000 and in effect result in the closing of a manager's position that we feel at this time is no longer necessary. If we look at some of our revenue and enrollment growth opportunities, here again, we want to make sure that we're maximizing our auxiliary growth programs. So not only is the swap meet very beneficial to all of the district, but we've also started kind of an entrepreneurial program in our regional testing center. I've talked about that briefly in the past, but year over year, we've seen $400,000 in growth in that program. And so an opportunity to demonstrate how we're trying to be innovative and use some entrepreneurial methods to grow our budget. When we look at the unrestricted general fund from last year to this, we're moving forward $2,900,000 ending fund balance, while we're currently projecting to have $2 million plus in an ending fund balance. I want to point out that that delta is going to be addressed with some of the reorganizations that I've talked about and some also identified local revenue growth opportunities that we have that we'll talk more about in the future. So we do anticipate that we'll have that 2 million or more as we conclude the budget year 26-27. As we're looking at the slides and the percentages and so forth, what I really want to highlight here is that we are moving in the right direction in terms of our personnel costs. If we were to total it, and Trustee Carr did not put it on the slide, but I was listening to you. Last year, we had 92.7% of our budget was spent in personnel and benefit costs. This year, we're at 91% and dropping. So we're moving in the right direction with respect to that. In terms of some of the local revenue.
Can I just
yes,
jump
ma'am.
in here real quick? I appreciate that you're going really fast, but I did have a question on
Yes.
this last slide. I was just curious about the range fees and the criminal justice driving fees. Can you explain what that is?
As a matter of fact, I was going to do that, so I'm glad you stopped me so I could spend a moment on it. Police training, first responder training, extremely expensive, as you know. And the young men and women who come through our program, whether they're sponsored or independent, are responsible for paying their fees related to firearms training and also defensive driver training. So they pay the campus for those, the privilege of going through that training, if you will. And then we likewise reimburse the training venues that provided that. So it comes in as a revenue and then we show it later as an expenditure going out. However, it does illustrate that there's an opportunity on the horizon, and part of the 2045 plan is to look at how do we do training and what elements of that training where there are costs involved could we capture, and with partners in the local, law enforcement area, could we maximize our facility in a way that might generate some additional revenues? So part of our 2045 plan includes that, and we're looking carefully at how to maximize that.
I would love to get with you later to talk a little bit more about that expansion and how we can be helpful with that, because I do think that's incredibly important. And I'm sorry I didn't see you this morning, but I was at Global
Were you there
College.
too?
I was there.
Oh, forgive me for that.
So I on the cart. I came in a little bit late, so I'm sorry I missed you this morning.
No, shame on me for not knowing that, but I'm glad you joined us. It was a
Quick
great
question
morning.
on
Yes.
slide, one of the biggest pies or third is orange, but I think the label got cut
So I
off.
was going to point out that my eagle-eyed president was texting me saying, why is that not labeled? On my original, it is labeled, but
I know,
somehow
but
in the
it didn't get it
translation,
here.
it fell off, and I
Okay.
apologize for that. But that actually is representing our classified, wait a minute, it's our part-time health benefit reimbursements. So it's actually, the dollar amount is $750,000 or 15% of that. And I think there may be one more on there. There was the dark blue one, and that is our CVS pharmacy lease. And
Okay.
that lease is 336,000 or 7%. I want to point out that that is actually less than it is on an annual basis because the way that they paid their fees last year, we actually recognized it last year. So there's about another $30,000 that we'll realize in this coming year.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And President Randall caught me and she was texting me on that. Then just the overall unrestricted fund revenue for this coming year is $68,000. And some things that we're looking at doing that will be additional cost savings. Again, when you look at our facilities and our needs with our facilities, one of the interesting things that we're looking at is by tearing down our existing outdated facilities, that actually will allow us to capture some savings. Because even though a building may be fallow, it still requires energy and attention and maintenance to keep them in a state where it would prevent people from coming in and looting and staying and that sort of thing. So we're expecting to save quite a bit of money by doing that. And then I can't leave you this evening without talking about our solar project. It's ahead of schedule. It's going great. We're very happy with the contractor. It has been a very innovative approach because by using their financing to do improvements to the campus, we save those costs up front for other necessary improvements. And then we're going to be paying a reduced rate for electricity going forward. As you have heard probably from the Vice Chancellor, we're looking at between last year and this year, 30% increase in electricity from Southern California Edison. And so we're going to be able to save that money. About 90% of our actual electrical costs will be provided by Forefront. And we're looking at about $9 million over the course of 20 years. So in every way we can, we're trying to look at this from a cost savings and entrepreneurial and growth perspective. And I think the last thing that I would point out here is that we have actually had a significant increase in our offerings to our students just in the area of food offerings. We have a new vendor in our cafeteria. They've realized some great improvement in the use by our students and also in the revenues that's generated. And believe it or not, just having a vending machine late at night when the cafeteria is not open, but a student is there, he's worked all day long, and they can go get a hot meal for $9 or $10 out of a machine. It's actually increased by 650% the last 3 years, vending options. So we're quite pleased with that result as well. And with that, I will turn it over, unless there are further questions, to my colleague, Christine Nguyen. Thank you very much.
So next we have our Vice President of Administrative Services with Coastline College, Christine Nguyen.
Good evening, trustees. Christine Nguyen, Vice President of Administrative Services at Coastline College. While I have the pleasure of presenting our PowerPoint live here, I do want to acknowledge my Director of Business Services, Derek Bowie, who is instrumental in putting together this entire presentation with no errors. 26-27 budget highlight for Coastline, starting with increasing revenue. We've heard about the special funding approved for the incarcerated program that generate an additional, that's the key, an additional $3 million in annual revenue for the district. With Coastline allocation, percentage allocation in the model of 17.38%, that would translate to $510,000 for Coastline. So thank you, Dr. Saban, for your swift action in reporting these under the special funding category. And Vice Chancellor Dringwine, I guess a check's coming to Coastline for the $510,000. The second thing you see on there, annual rental income of $503,000 from the 3 tenants currently in the annex building. Thank you, trustees, for approving these leases. So these are contractual obligation. So we know the income is there. And it's beyond 26-27, but we are only capturing 26-27 rental income in this slide. Last one, part-time faculty health benefits state reimbursement of $600,000. So Dr. Parker, you will be happy to hear this. We first see this appropriation for the part-time faculty health benefits state reimbursement in 24-25. We see the same amount appropriated in fiscal year 25-26, 100% reimbursed. So with that, we are comfortable with the funding. We are budgeting that in 26, 27 as income. Precisely to your question earlier, if you know the money is going to be there, why not creating a line item? So being conservative like Vice Chancellor Drinkwine, we want to make sure the money is coming. So after 3 years, we are comfortable at budgeting that as an income line for Coastline. However, the conservative in us fiscal people, we actually received 750,000 in reimbursement in 25, 26. We are going to budget 600,000 just in case the funding is not fully funded in 26, 27. Of course, if it does come in, you will see that under the surplus line item. Reducing expenditure, Chancellor Yamamura talked about this. We want to thank you, the district leadership, for understanding it's a one-time waiver in fiscal year 26, 27, but that is quite a relief for the college, for Coastline, without having that assessment in 26, 27 amount to $1.5 million. We understand it is one-time funding, and we'll make sure that we spend that wisely. Next one, we are going to retire the annex building debt service, 4.6 million in October 2026, a month from now. So I know at the time, I believe Trustee Moreno, Trustee Hornbuckle, thank you for your support. I still remember standing here presenting the financing plan to acquire the annex building in 2016. Believed it or not, it is now retired in this year. And what that would mean is it would capture an annual savings of $454,000 to the college because we no longer have to service this debt. That is not to mention the annual rental income we generate from having this facility. And you'll see that in a couple slides more because there are more to report on that.
Is there going to be a mortgage burning ceremony like people have done historically? And highlight with Trustee Hornbuckle and Trustee Moreno, who was around when that whole thing got started and approved. What? You got the matches.
We appreciate your vision and your support. And it is, you can see how fruitful that decision has benefited Coastline. And the last strategy for reducing expenditure, again, maximize the use of categorical and restricted fund and the grants. We're happy to report that the state COVID block grant, we have a balance of $869,000, and we have a spending plan to spend all of this in fiscal year 26, 27 and fiscal year 27, 28. We were fortunate because this is one of those COVID block grant that does not have an end date. Having said that, we didn't want to sit on the money and send the wrong message to the legislator that we didn't have a need for it, but we want to make sure it's well spent. We will spend that down by next fiscal year. Schedule maintenance project, we are happy to report that in the current year, there was an allocation for scheduled maintenance project for Coastline, that's $343,000. We will spend all of that now within fiscal year 26, 27, as we do have aging facility. We are also happy to report that Measure M endowment, one is set up for facility and one for technology. You can see that that is the running balance in these two endowment. And keep in mind that there is an annual distribution every year. This is just a year-to-date distribution that is available to fund whether it's our technology refresh or our facility maintenance. So I believe it will run through 2036. So we still have another 10 years of distribution on the Measure M endowment. Unrestricted general fund actual, the first column, how we close out for 25, 26, and budget what we are proposing for 26, 27. So we start 25, 26 with a beginning fund balance of $8.3 million. And then you can see the total revenue, $42,924,000. Jumping down to the total expenditure, 40,334,000. This is an actual number because we've closed the book, so it's not a projection. Coastline closed the book with 2.5 plus million dollars in surplus. That, if you add that to the beginning fund balance, it brings Coastline total fund balance to a little bit shy of $11 million. Moving on to 26, 27, very fortunate. We would start the year with a beginning fund balance of about $11 million. And then again, you can see the total revenue and total expenditure proposed for 26, 27. We are anticipating surplus of about 1.1 million plus and carry the ending balance to $12 million. And this reconciled to Vice Chancellor Drinkwine's district-wide fund balance earlier. If you look at the Coastline line, that's the amount that you will see. Adopted budget for 26, 27 unrestricted general fund. So also, as my colleague presented, the total salary and benefit for Coastline amount to 90%. And then you can see minor percentage for what we call discretionary dollars, for supplies, for capital outlay. Other outgo stand for the fund that we set aside for financial aid. Those would be the matching fund that we are required in participating in the federal grant programs. And the very the last thing on there, footnote is Coastline ending fund balance of $11 million represented about 27% reserve of our operating budget.
Wait, before you go, there's a light blue square or pie that doesn't have a label. Capital outlay is
Capital.
286. That's 1%.
Yes.
So that's that one. So what's the orange? There's a, okay. Yeah, so there's other outlay. There's a tiny, it's okay. Okay, so that's 1% at 285. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
Yes.
Because the capital outlay would be the orange, right?
Can you go back?
Yes.
I'm looking at the light blue that seems to be a pretty big pie. So it seems like the orange would be the capital outlay, and then there's the other one that's like this really tiny. I don't mean to embarrass you.
So for the record, Derek has reported to me that in our presentation that was submitted to the district, we have all of the numbers here. But I think when the slide was built. in
Yeah, it was,
PDF
that's what
format,
happened to
so
Golden
let me
West too.
report that for you because I do have the number.
Okay,
So the blue area representing other operating expense and services, the dollars amount is 3.5 million and it's 8%.
thank you.
Absolutely.
I trust everyone's slide looked fine, and for some reason, when it got to the public, it got reformatted.
If I
I'll
can add
give it to
the,
everybody.
the other operating expenses is the turquoise pie. The orange pie is the capital outlay.
And then the little teeny tiny, almost looks like a black thin thing,
Yeah.
is 0% other out.
And I am sure it happened in my shop that things went awry.
I like
Because I can't imagine that Derek and Christine did anything, knowing them, it had to be my side of the house. Yes.
Can we
Thank
also
you,
admit
Vice
it
Chancellor
also was the
Drinkline.
same with Golden West?
Absolutely. Well,
Okay.
obviously it had to be. If all the common denominator is mine. So
Appreciate it. Okay, it's mostly to get information. Thank you.
Thank you for catching that. All right. So this is the local revenue, the breakout of the local revenue. Non-resident, we broken it out to two component. One is out of state and one is the international student. So you can see that for international student, 750,000 or 30%. Interestingly enough, more than the out of state. For Coastline, 450,000 and 18%. And other local income, 330,000 part-time health benefit reimbursement, 600,000. So this is the point that I want to bring to address Dr. Parker's question earlier. STRS refund, we have also seen that, I think, for the last 2 or 3 years. So for the first time in fiscal year 26-27, we are comfortable budgeting it as a line item for local income. So that's why it's appearing on this chart. Rental income, 320,000. It's about 13% of the local income generated. So this is the one where Derek also pointed out to me that you can see that 94% is through the revenue allocation model of $41 million for the apportionment, and the local revenue amount to a little bit shy of 2.5 million or 6%. All right, so you say, Christine, what's left? We've highlighted what has taken place as we develop the budget for Coastline for 26-27. As Vice Chancellor Wine referenced earlier, this is actually phase 5 of the fiscal stability plan. 5 phase into it, there's not much expense to trim after 5 phases. So all of our focus would be on the revenue. You know, you always have an opportunity to increase revenue or cut expense. After 5 rounds, there's not much expense left to cut. So with that, for the revenue, facility revenue opportunity with the annex building, I talked about this earlier. What I reported earlier of the 503,000 are just leases that are in place. I'm in the middle of negotiation right now for 2 more leases. One is 223,000 a year, and another one for 190,000 a year. With that, we still have 1 space left in the annex building, and it's on the 2nd floor. And the potential annual rental income is 150 to 240,000. I apologize, I have to get water.
She's tired of telling you all the new money she's going to be making.
All right. And at the past board meeting, we heard Trustee Nguyen charging us with growth for international students. So that is one of our strategy, is to expand the international student enrollment through potential MOU with the Vietnam Association of Community Colleges. Foundation software savings. I'm happy to report that we've hired a very, very talented director of foundation who is a software developer. So with that, he has actually built a software called Grad Roots, and we are using that right now to replace the licensing with Blackbaud, which would save the college $40,000 a year in software licensing. And we love to spread the wealth. So we also understand, I understand that Grad Roots is being used by Golden West College Foundation and the district foundation as well, capturing a saving of annual licensing fee. So very happy to report that. Cell tower site licensing agreement. We are in the middle of negotiating for an annual site licensing agreement. We actually reached that. It would generate 42,000 in annual rental income for the college. But in the spirit of entrepreneurial, we are now pursuing profit sharing opportunity with the cell tower. So I understand that, and they actually have agreed to this. So I hope to present to the trustee in the near board meeting an agreement where we not only generate an annual rental income, but profit sharing as they bring on additional tenant to the cell tower. So every cell tower that tenant that they bring in addition, we will get a percentage of that profit, gross profit.
And where's the cell tower?
The cell tower is in the back of the annex building The beauty of this is it's not taking up any parking space. Right now, it's just in the back where the shrub is. So I knew you would ask this question. As a matter of fact, I took a picture so that I can show you because parking is always a concern if it's going to take over parking space. So when we present that contract, there is actually an attachment that will illustrate where the cell tower will be residing.
And I think trustee Moreno has a question too.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned towers, and that reminds me that we own a television tower, Vice Chancellor Drinkwine. And right now, there are a couple of organizations, the Highway Patrol and the Southern California Gas Company, I think, that have radios that work out of that. Could we look into additional rental spots or opportunities to rent there? Because the coverage is we visited a couple of times when the Whittier Preservation Group wanted to take it away from us or just ask us to give it to them. But it is a beautiful building. It's a beautiful site. There's plenty of power, and it's about 300 feet tall.
Absolutely. We
I
can
think that-
definitely explore and see if there is interest for people to add to the tower. Absolutely. We'll put it out there.
I think that's a good revenue source if
Yeah.
we work it.
Great
Thank you
idea.
so
Thank
much.
you.
And then the very last item on there.
Wait,
oh,
and
that's-
and
can I
trustee
just-
Carr has a question or.
For asking questions about this. I just had a quick question about the facilities revenue opportunities with the annex building. And I appreciate that you have been looking at renting out the second floor. My only concern is the elevator. Is that going to be something that the district is going to have to do a significant capital outlay to create and build that elevator?
Thank you, trustee Carr, for that question. We actually have looked into this and actually has commissioned an architect to design to put in an elevator for that space. It will cost, I should have this number. I want to say it would cost up to $3 million to put in the elevator. So currently with a 10,000 square foot, it would take me 10 years to recoup that cost. So what I'm hoping, working with the broker, is if we can lease the space at half of the cost without putting in the elevator, and hopefully that would incentivize someone to come in with half of the cost, then we don't have to put in the elevator and we can capture that income right away. So I'm working on that strategy right now. And the reason why we are pivoting it as such is we currently have an elevator in the building, but it is restricted for Social Security Administration. So with their lease coming to an end, there is an opportunity to have elevator access to the second floor. So we are trying to see what is the best way to present that second floor until that lease expire. And the very last point on here, because I work for a president who is also very well versed in negotiation, growth incentive, $1.2 million in additional district revenue coming to Coastline for achieving, and I would venture to say exceeding, the growth target. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then that brings us to the district-wide actions. I summarize these very quickly at the top of the presentation for the fiscal stability plan, that we do have those district-wide actions, the health benefit change, the one-time use of the retiree reserve, the recategorization of incarcerated students, all are part of that fiscal stability plan. So then moving on, every year we do have to talk about the education protection account. You will see this next week. And so then as we look ahead, in addition to the district's own budget, and I do have confidence that as we look at the 27-28 year, we will find solutions. I do have confidence that a combination of looking at the retiree trust, a combination of looking at additional revenue maximization, whether that be through an additional summer shift, whether that be through other opportunities, we have actions we have not launched. So if necessary, we can launch them. But when we look at the national environment, there is uncertainty and there's turmoil. Over the past couple of years, we don't know what we're going to get until we get it. And we know with the dissolution of the Department of Education, we don't know where things are going to land. And so there is uncertainty. And as we move forward, we have to assume the absence of supports. We also have to assume that the local economy is going to be uncertain. But I am reassured that the state did reestablish reserves in their current budget. And that gives us reassurance for the 26-27 budget. Looking beyond the current and subsequent year, it's a little bit more cloudy. So our ability to focus beyond that gets problematic. But as we continue to grow our own enrollment, and as we continue to be innovative, and as we continue to serve our community, we have been incredibly successful. And I think that's where our strength lies, that we have proven to be able to overcome challenges. We've been able to succeed and to be incredibly successful at growing our reserves, in identifying solutions and in implementing those solutions. And I am, despite the fact that we show significant deficits over the 2 subsequent years, optimistic as we look at our budget. I know that we have positive things ahead of us, and I am proud of the budget that I'll be presenting to you next year. And I think it's reflective of some incredible work over the course of several years by some incredible people that show some very deep actions that will be beneficial for the district for the future. So I am happy to answer any questions that you have.
I will garner any questions you may have. I appreciate you letting us stop while the presentation was going on so we could go slides that gave the question and add the questions. So do we have any other? Yes, Trustee Wynn.
I appreciate the presentation. Thank you to your team and the entire team for working on this. I have to say I was very concerned looking at all the numbers, even though it's a conservative projection, but as a business owner, I always look at the worst case scenario, and seeing a negative 11 million, then 15 million, and then dipping under our reserve target. I'm concerned, and I want to, I know nobody wants to touch the elephant in the room, and talk about our compensation structure. But when we see 90% of our operating budget is salaries and benefits, and we see that with all the implementation, all the maneuvers, all the, for lack of a better term, like gimmicks that we've been using, summer shift and all that to, all these, stopgap measures that we've been implementing, I feel like we're dying by 1,000 cuts and we're running out of Band-Aids for the future. And we see that in all the total cost saving measures that we've taken in the last few years that's slowly decreasing. And so we're running out of options in the future. And so if we don't address the elephant in the room, long term, we're looking at, some really tough decisions. And so I think we need to really look at this long term and have like a long term solution. So that's not my question. This is my comment for tonight. Thank you.
Yes, trustee
I'll make a
Hornbuckle.
comment as well. Well, I will say it appeared to me that our overall percentage is about 87% salaries. Yeah. So that's a lot better than it used to be. It was 91% at one time, I think. And if you kind of take a long view of this budget, it depends largely on what happens at the state, but it also depends on what happens in our local economy. And so what we can control is kind of a small amount when you look at the whole thing. So I'm not going to lose any sleep over the budget just yet, because I think we've got really good people who are working on solutions, and it is a long, long time goal. So thanks. And that was a good presentation. Thank you. Thank you all.
Trustee Moreno, then trustee Carr.
I've sat through several budget presentations, not just here at the district for 20 years, but in other jobs. And the situation that we have nationally in the administration and what's being done to the Department of Education, and what I reported back in 2024 on the Project 25 that was, floating around. I reported to this board that the Department of Education was going to be obliterated in that report of Project 2025 that the Trump administration was handling and throwing around. We don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know what will occur as things reflect and react and impact our state budget. The one thing that I appreciate in having budget documents is that, as the chancellor started out, it's our spending plan. It's not only a spending plan, but it's the history and the composition of what it costs and what the services are that we want. It's the menu of how we provide the services to our students through this organization. Now, if in the next couple of months, there's all kinds of problems with elections, we're still going to have this document. And we have history with all of our budget documents. And I see budgets, and I've learned that budgets are living documents that show you what is spent. Yeah, we have savings, we have expenditures, we have overruns, but it is our map on how we provide society with the services that we are known to provide. Ours is education. Others are health. Others are public works, digging up streets, putting pipes in the ground. But for us, it is the plan that we have for the district and the colleges within the district, and what each dollar means to different parts of the organization and the facilities and to the kids that we see and the employees that we have. I'm not going to sit here and say it's all going to work out fine, because there have been years that others here know that that doesn't always happen. But we have the document, we have the plan, we have the spending plan. So let's see what this election brings and how well we can recover from the way things have been going. Because our country and our democracy are at risk, but we have a plan on how we see our organization going forward. And it all is because of the people sitting in this room and the people that work for this district that know what that job is and what we're here to do. And I can only thank you for all that work and for knowing what our purpose is.
Trustee Carr.
Well said, Trustee Moreno. First off, I want to thank you, Marlene, for all the time that you spent with me this morning and to tell you how well she knows this presentation. We had a Zoom call this morning at 9 a.m., but she was stuck in traffic on that horrible 405 accident that happened this morning that I think caught everybody. And I would refer to my notes and I would say, well, on slide 38, and she knew exactly what I was talking about, which is just really incredible. So we had a very robust conversation this morning about the presentation, a lot longer than I thought we were going to have. So thank you so much for your time. And it's one of the reasons why I was late to Golden West College as well, because I'm trying to just do too many things at once. But nevertheless, thank you so much to everybody who put together a really beautiful budget presentation. It's very well thought out. And to sort of echo off of what Trustee Moreno was saying, I mentioned it at the last meeting when we were talking about the budget and my concerns with grants from the Department of Education and knowing that these funds are constantly being weaponized, pulled at the last minute, and the uncertainty that lies around them. But I feel comforted in knowing that if those funds are no longer there or suddenly are no longer funded to our campus, that we have the resources to compensate for that in the short term. Long term, we're going to have to obviously think about how we go and move forward. But I appreciate that you included that element in your presentation. I think that's something that we all need to be made aware of and know that it, depending on what happens, as you mentioned, Trustee Moreno, how DOE functions and funds and supports the community colleges is something to be seen. So, but nevertheless, I also agree with Trustee Hornbuckle. We can only control what we can control. And so I think based on the tools that we have available to us right now, this is a great plan moving forward. And I also am the eternal optimist. I do think that we will find solutions to remedy and that $11 million is a worst case scenario. And I think that we will find solutions to compensate for that. Thank you.
So being part of our district's budget long before I got on this board, I was seeing our budget and seeing us basically slide into a time when our personnel costs were getting higher and higher, which meant we didn't have room to wiggle. So I know, Trustee, when you talked about cuts, 1,000 cuts, we don't have enough Band-Aids. I look at the cuts as we said the really scary part out loud once I became a trustee and had our chancellor and some of our new vice chancellors said, we cannot continue the way we've been going because we won't be in a position to support student success. We had a couple goals, one of which is to reduce the percentage of personnel. You have to really realize what is important in a budget is what is causing the extreme deficit spending. Yes, we sort of got saved by COVID. If COVID had hit with the way the budget was and the way the spending was, probably us and many, many more community colleges would have been bankrupt. So I appreciate the slow, steady march to recognize nothing can happen overnight, that it's a shared vision of how do we work on both the revenue side and the expenditure side, and how do we agree about where we're headed? Because we all know your budget and where you spend is your priorities. And we know our priorities are personnel, our faculty, our staff. We don't make widgets. We educate students. And, you know, as a private business owner, I mean, if you did spend 90% on personnel and you manufacture widgets, you'd be out of business, or in our case, a restaurant. But I also want to say how we are in a much better place. And I want to thank all the staff, not just, you know, and Marlene and her staff, but each of the colleges, because that's where a lot of the work got done, but also on across everybody. I didn't see anybody when I was talking to everybody, no matter what their position was, they didn't have ideas on how we could reorganize, where could we increase revenue, what happened. We even at the board said, hey, we're not using our space. When one of our now employees that we stole came in and said, we might need space for a congressional person. But I also know that we do have a future that's uncertain. So I feel very good about the stability. I also am seeing with the federal government, just because I have some scientists in my family, and there's some panic hiring going on, which tells me there's going to be panic hiring when it comes, whether it's housed in the Department of Education, housed in the Treasury Department, housed in civil rights. We don't know where. I mean, they've pulled it all apart, of which one of our presidents put it all together. So I'm not sure we're not going to be seeing pulling it back together to do overseas. So if I just know my daughter-in-law has multiple offers, because guess what? Our weather, NOAA, can't help the world and our communities understand what weather's hitting them. So guess what they're doing? Doge eliminated, I think, 200 positions, and they're back hiring 220 positions as fast as they can. So I'm looking at, and no one's saying anything. All I know is behind that. But I want to thank everybody. I want to echo what all of our trustees have said. It really is taking everyone to move us in this much more stable environment. And I feel very, very confident that we've clearly and transparently identified the assumptions, because I think that was very frustrating for a while. And we've clearly identified when those assumptions are better and when they end up being not quite what we thought they were. And that helps us all understand everything. So I just want to say thank you. We don't know where everything's going to go. We don't know CPI. We don't know what our interest rates are going to be. We don't know how high our electricity, but putting in all those solars I saw at Golden West, I've seen that at OCC, and we have solar here. We can do steps to mitigate that uncertainty, and that's what I'm seeing. So I just want to thank everybody here, and especially the leaders that have been supporting and guiding. Everyone's saying this is what we can possibly do. And we know the harder work starts now, because we know sort of, I always say, the low hanging fruit and what we've been able to find, but I know it'll continue. So thank you. Just thank you, thank you, thank you. And I don't know if the student trustee, do you have anything?
Truthfully, like a lot of that was confusing to me. So thank you for like breaking it down, because I think it did definitely give it a clearer picture. And then also kind of what everyone else said, like thank you for all your hard work and for supporting all the students and the budget. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, without any more, we're going to go ahead and move through the agenda. We have 3.01 board meeting dates on page 83 of the hard copy. It's just a receive and file that we will be taking pictures, but not have a meeting afterwards. So that'll be good. 3.02, which is sunshining to receive and file. I don't know if the chancellor or if Diane, Dr. Fierro will want to say anything, or it's in the budget. I mean, it's in the agenda. Okay, 3.03, which is the CFE Sunshine, the final. We're going to receive and file that. Okay, 4.01, which is action item, that I need a motion for us to approve the revised academic calendar for 27-28 and a revised calendar for Golden West College cosmetology program for 27-28.
I'll make the motion to approve the revised calendars.
Do I have a second? Second. Any questions or comments? All right, Barring no, I'll ask the student trustee and the rest of us. Aye. Any no's? Okay, motion carries. At this time, then we have the close of meeting. Do we have any adjournment notes?
If you don't mind, Trustee Parker.
Please.
So in terms of the adoption of the calendar, the members of the public would have seen that the calendar was adopted originally several weeks ago in our normal rhythm. And the CFE quite justifiably pointed out in their contract that they have the ability to negotiate that. So before we had a broader committee that served to set the calendar, but we always need to comply with the contract. So with that, we ended up negotiating the contract. And so we've agreed to the calendar as proposed by the CFE for the 27-28 year. I do want to point out, and as it is in the agreement, the later starting date in August will set the date of the last day of the semester on the Saturday following the Friday when we all adjourn for winter break. So we will notice the students and the faculty and others to make sure that if there are any questions with regard to finals and turning in grades, that they're prepared for that eventuality. And again, when we reopen after winter break, we will be able to answer questions and concerns that faculty or students may have about the grades, because they won't be due until after the new year. And I would also, if you permit me, the budget isn't quite the worst case because we haven't estimated a recession. We know that recessions come in California, but we've done a long time without them, and they're not predictable. I mean, we've been predicting a recession every year, or some economists have been for several years, and it hasn't occurred yet, right? We thought we were really in deep economic trouble with COVID, and it turned out to be the opposite in terms of the flood of revenue. So we haven't calculated a recession, so that could be on the negative side. But to Trustee Wynn's point, the other elephant in the room too is that when Vice Chancellor Drinkwine came on board 2 months ahead of me, and we looked at the budget and discovered that there was a structural deficit, we projected that out. That was 4 years ago. And at that time, we did project out that there would be a deficit in 3 years. And so I think some folks think that because we didn't, that means everything's okay. We didn't have that projected deficit because we did our fiscal stability measures, because we did get some one-time revenues. The Fiscal Stability Act gave us $9 million for increasing the benchmark for reserves from 10% to 16.67. So that was an easy one because the 9 million helped us get to that higher level of reserves. There have been other one-time events, again, such as the recalculation of incarcerated students. The problem is we can't count on that, and we can't crank that into the budget. Nonetheless, we are engaged in measures that we also can't show. We are going to engage in serious measures, again, despite some discouragement at the federal level about international students and a greater trepidation that international students may have in coming here, that we have some very serious initiatives that are likely to increase the number of international students. If we increase them by, there's about 800 or 900 currently total across the district, about 1,200. So here, if we increase by 100, which would be less than 10%, 100, that would be $500,000 in revenues to the colleges. We crank in right now as we go from the Banner system to the Banner SaaS system, software as a service. We have an overlap of a year because you never shuts one down and start another one up. We run an overlap. So we account for the budget costs of that overlap, but we don't show that after because it hasn't happened yet. So there are some other items that we can attend to and address that will help us with expenses, that'll help us with increase in revenue down the road. So there is a middle ground there in terms of pessimism and optimism, or just dismissing this as, they always cry wolf all the time. Again, we've been fortunate and lucky and skilled in terms of navigating where we've gotten to this point. And to Trustee Parker's point, the easier things to do in terms of fiscal stability plans we've done. And so it will be a little bit harder and take a little bit more creativity to figure out how we close that gap. And with that, I have to unfortunately have an adjourning motion. Our general counsel's spouse, his wife Marilyn, passed away on Monday, and we send him our deepest condolences to the Lipton family.
Thank you. And with that, do I have a motion for adjournment? Do I have a second? All those, second, we have a second. I'll ask the trustee, would you like to adjourn?
Aye.
The rest of us? Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.